What you can do is to focus mainly on the annual report, including the post-audit action plan. And then if there are issues that members would love to raise that in relation to their performance, they will do that as and when we deal with the questions and answer session. Can I hand over to you, Minister, to introduce the reports and also you delegate which officials you want them to present? And then I've been given a list of the departmental delegation I have at my disposal. As and when they speak, one will be able to recognize them. Safe to say, as and when they speak, then they will have to introduce themselves again and tell us the portfolios that they had, the branches that they lead. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening to all members of the committee. And thank you for giving us this opportunity to introduce the report. Chairperson, I'm together in this meeting with our Director General, Ms. Nomfundo Chabalala, and also, as you correctly point out, several of our Deputy Director Generals who lead different branches in the department. I think for this meeting, it's also important to say that the Deputy Director General responsible for Fisheries and the Accounting Officer for the Marine Living Resources Fund, Ms. Sue Middleton, is in the meeting to handle that particular aspect of the agenda. Chair, I would want to take the opportunity before we start just to introduce to the committee the new Chief Financial Officer of the department. And I would ask Ms. Andiswa just to turn on her camera so that members of the Portfolio Committee can see her. Ms. Just joined us at the beginning, in the middle of October, and she is our new Chief Financial Officer. Ms. Just, I just want to give you an opportunity to greet the committee.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Good afternoon to the Honorable Chairperson and the Honorable members of the committee and my colleagues in the DG. My name is Andiswa Jas. I just recently joined the department on the 1st of October as the Chief Financial Officer of the department. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jas. And I'm sure we'll be receiving an input from you later. Honorable members, as you would have heard from the input by the Auditor General this morning, we have made some progress with regard to financial accountability, and there are other areas where we still have considerable weaknesses. In terms of progress, I think it's important to say, Chairperson, that now all 5 of our entities have unqualified audits. In the 2019 financial year, only 2 of the entities were unqualified. Now all 5, including the Marine Living Resources Fund that had a disclaimer in 2019, is now unqualified. And I think that that is an important step forward. Unfortunately, the department itself remains with a qualified audit and with 2 matters of emphasis. Now, honourable members, I think there was a very important input made by the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee this morning. And she spoke about the fact that compliance with the Public Finance Management Act is a basic norm and basic requirement of all government departments. And I think that is a correct observation. And what we understand in this department is that all the money we receive in the department itself is public money. And because it is public money, we have a duty to ensure that we comply with the Public Finance Management Act, and we have a duty to ensure that our financial statements comply with generally accepted accounting principles. Now, it is a source of embarrassment to me and a source of shame to me that we are now receiving our third qualified audit. And I think that we want to acknowledge here this evening that we still have not achieved this very basic requirement, this very basic norm that the chairperson outlined for us this morning. And accordingly, we do not come here with anything other than an understanding that we're in for a beating. I have said to all of the senior managers in the department that we carry collective responsibility for this failure, and that we have to be here collectively to hear the strong words that members of this portfolio committee would want to share with us for our failure to achieve the basic norm and standard that is required of us, namely an unqualified audit. And so we're expecting that you're going to be tough on us tonight. We understand that this is your duty in terms of carrying out your oversight function. And we are not here pleading for any mercy. What we will do is we will explain what we have done since we received the previous qualified audit. We will take you through the plan that we tabled at that time, and we will show you what progress we've made and what progress we haven't made. The intention of doing this, honourable members, is not to make excuses, but it is to share with you in an open and honest manner the difficulties that we are facing, and in instances where we have made some areas of progress, those areas of progress. And I think that really we're doing this in order to give you some insight into the complex difficulties that we face in certain aspects of our work. We have also put together, which is additional information that we circulated during the course of the day, details on the consequence management that was requested from honourable members this morning. So what I would do, Chairperson, with your permission, is I would ask the Director General to make the presentation. There's two presentations, and she will also be assisted in this regard by the Chief Financial Officer, who will come in and talk about the plan to try and move us away from the qualified audit once we have completed this process here today. Thank you very much. Let me hand over to the Director General.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you for the opening remarks. Director General, can you then take us through, and you must also introduce the colleagues that you have brought along. Over to you, DG.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. Thank you, Minister. This evening, I'm with the DDGs, as Minister has highlighted, also with the Chief Financial Officer. Just to introduce them, Chair, and I'm going to request that they put on their video so that the committee can then identify who is here. To start with, is the Chief Financial Officer has already been introduced, Chair. I'm not going to introduce her. We also have a new DDG for Corporate Management Services, Ms. Mamohadi Shelley Mashala, who has joined the department with effect from the 15th of October. I don't know whether she is able to just put on the video.
Thanks, DG, and good evening to the Honorable Chairperson and members and Minister, as well as colleagues. My name is Mamu Khadi Mashallah. I am the DDG Corporate Management. Thank you.
Thank you very much, DDG. For the regulatory compliance, we have Ms. Benderman, Vanessa. Just show your picture, your video. You do not have to introduce yourself so that we do not take time. Vanessa, Ms. Benderman, DDG Regulatory Compliance.
Evening, DG. I hope you can see me. I have the video on. I'm not sure if it's projecting.
Yes, yes, we can see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair, Oceans and Coasts, we have DDG, Judy Bierman.
Good evening, Honourable Chair, Honourable Members, Minister, DG. I've turned on my video.
Thank you very much. And then we have climate change. This position, the DDG, has recently left the department. And also we have an apology of the acting DDG because of a critical commitment that he had. So we have the Chief Director, Mr. Chloe Ramal.
Good evening, Minister, DDG, SDG, and Honorable Chair. Good evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then on biodiversity and conservation, Ms. Skumza Changa, the acting DDG.
Thank you, DG, and evening, Honorable Chairperson and members and Minister. Thank you.
And for environmental program, we have DDG, Ms. Nonhlanhla Mkhize. Ms. Mkhize, are you able to put on your video? Okay, I will pass. I think she's possibly having connection challenges. Chemicals and Waste Management, Ms. Mamohala.
Good evening, Honorable Chairperson and members, Minister, DG, and colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. It's Mamohala Mosekene. Forestry, we have an acting DDG, Ms. Pumeza Nodada.
Good evening, Chairperson. Good evening to the members, Minister, and the DG. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Then the last is Fisheries, Ms. Sue Middleton.
Good evening, Honourable members, Honourable Chairperson, Minister, and DG.
Thank you very much. Honourable Chair and members, those are the DDGs that are present in the meeting. I am going to immediately go into the report that Minister has referred to in terms of the progress that we have made. As a department, we unfortunately have been qualified for 2021. I don't know whether the slides are going to be shared. And as the Minister had indicated, I think this is not, no, the presentation on progress made on the financials. As the Minister had highlighted in the opening remarks, as a department, we are indeed not pleased by this outcome. We are working very hard to turn around the situation. Unfortunately, we now have been qualified for the third time around as a department. This presentation, Honorable Chair and members, is mainly to take the committee through the plan that was there and was presented to this committee when the 1920 audit was finalized. What have we done in relation to that? And we are also then going into the consequence management that has been implemented as the way investigations that were finalized by December 2020. So you can move on to the next slide. I think this is not the presentation. The other presentation you had was the right one.
The person sharing it, your colleague, DG.
Yes, I don't know.
Sorry, DG, I'm projecting. I'm uploading now.
You didn't do a rehearsal before the meeting, DG.
Unfortunately, Minister, but we had all our unfortunately, Chair, but we had all our presentations ready. Buiso, are you managing? Yes. Okay, so we will start with briefing the committee on progress made, and in this slide it does highlight the history of the audit outcome for the department, whereas way back as 17-18 the department had an adverse findings. And from 2018-19, the department was then qualified with findings, and there were 11 findings. 1920, the department was qualified with 3 main findings. And then in 2021, the department still is qualified in 2 areas, but there's 4 qualifying paragraphs, which we are going to go into. The next slide. And basically, I think this emphasized the importance of compliance to the PFMA, as already emphasized by the chair, and also Minister has alluded to this. And as a department, we are found wanting in as far as compliance to PFMA. Mainly also the issues around GRAP and also your modified cash standards. I'm going to skip this because it was last year's timeframes whereby because of COVID, the submission of financials was pushed to the end of July. However, in the current audited period, which was 2021, it went back to the 31st of May. The next slide. So this is the plan that was tabled to this committee when then the 1920 audit was finalized. And I am then going to take the committee through what have we done as a department in terms of ensuring that we deal with the matters that were in that plan. The first one is talking to immovable tangible assets, which was one of the findings in the 1920. Where those were not disclosed in line with the modified cash standards. But also the critical issue here is that the AG was not able to determine what informs the adjustment of the balances from the previous financial year into the year that would have followed. And what we are highlighting here, Chairperson and Honorable and members, is that this is still an area where, as a department, we have not moved. It's still a challenge. And we are working on ensuring that we provide justifiable and substantiated evidence for all disclosures that we make in our financial statements. And I think this is one critical area which then the CFO will allude to, given that it has been a qualifying area, even in the audits that have been concluded. The second part was around overstatement of accruals, whereby as a department, the documents that we provided vis-a-vis what was disclosed in the financials, it was also, there was no proper evidence of the figure that was disclosed in the financials. And this basically talked to internal controls in terms of ensuring that we constantly monitor accruals and record them accordingly and keep the records accurately, so that when then we submit financials, we have then attached schedules that then substantiate all the figures that we disclose in the financials. We have ratified this, and as a result, it hasn't been an issue in the current audit. We are maintaining a clear record around accruals. We just need to improve on record keeping. Record keeping in the department is still a challenge. The third one is mainly around the overstatement of commitments. And basically here is that we managed to rectify it through an adjustment also in the financial year, or in the financials of the financial year 1920. However, we still need to work on this area, because it still suffers in the qualification of the financial year 2021. And this is mainly around projects that are actually implemented at regional level. And there isn't sufficient controls that ensure that we have all documentation that actually substantiate the work done, and also what has been completed, and also what is it that has been maintained, and a proper valuation of that capital. So that is one of the areas that we are consistently, though we adjusted and resolved, we still need to improve on that area. Next slide. On goods and services. Goods and services, mainly the challenge is around record keeping. Whatever we had disclosed in the financials, we then had to adjust, given that there were certain elements like outsourcing of services that were not necessarily included in the amounts that were there in our financials. Basically, here, Honorable Chair, it talks to the systems that we have in the department in as far as the procure to pay, whereby from creating an order, having finalized a contract, up to the payment level, we do not have proper records being kept, such that then it creates a challenge when we compile our financial statements. We have since now put in place a system. It's a pilot that is going to assist us in terms of ensuring that we properly document all the information from contracts up to payments, and this will allow easy retrieval of documents. So this matter has been resolved. The next one is on expenditure, and I think it links to the capital commitments that we have actually highlighted where they were overstated. We resolved this matter. Obviously, I think the AG allowed us then to do an adjustment. But what we then do is that we have engaged service providers, because what happens is that we would capitalize whatever has been paid in relation to either a construction project or a capital project, without necessarily removing elements that are non-capital. So that actually would then be reflected in a manner that either we understate or we overstate the capitalization of those assets in the financials. So we have engaged service providers, especially those that are responsible for infrastructure delivery. When the invoices are sent through, they then need to ensure that they separate the various expenditure items depending on the nature of expense, so that then we capitalize the accurate. So that system is in place and has been dealt with in the department. The next slide. Advance payments. This was one of the major challenges, Honorable Chair, where we were making advance payments without necessarily goods being received or work done. That has since stopped. In the year 2021, and also in the current year, which we are in, we no longer do advance payment. We have to have work done, work certified, invoice sent through, and then we pay. Because this was opening us up to a situation whereby you can incur fruitless expenditure, where you pay in advance and you do not necessarily receive the value. However, this has been finalized, it's resolved, and we no longer doing any advance payments. The next slide, in the next slide, we also touch on irregular expenditure. This is still a concern, and I think the AG highlighted it in the morning, where the AG indicated that this is still a qualifying matter for the department, and the main challenge is there is no evidence of accuracy and completeness of our irregular expenditure. And that is as a result of whatever we are disclosing and whatever we disclose. When the auditors do their audits, they identify further irregular expenditure. We have put in place processes, and those processes, we believe that are going to mature over time. They are not yet at an ideal stage, but we do have a clear register. When you do your payments, you go back to your contract, you check the contract was indeed approved by BAC accordingly. And if it was, then that is fine. However, if it is an irregular contract, you then have to record each and every payment that you make that is irregular, and then you have to then disclose that as such. However, I think as we move towards maturing of the system, we then have to deal with the systemic challenges of not having irregular contracts in the department. But given that we have a history, we're now making sure that whatever contract or payment that is done, if it comes from the historic irregular contract, it is properly registered, and it then will be properly disclosed, which will improve accuracy and also completeness. And hopefully moving forward, we are then going to be able to resolve this matter. Fruitless and wasteful was resolved. However, it continuously, and I think it talks to the root causes. We would have resolved this one, but we did not necessarily, our action plan did not address the root cause, such that there was about another 3 million identified in the audit that has just been concluded. So the CFO will go into details in terms of how then do we deal with those root cause, and also put in place control measures that will ensure that we do not incur wasteful and fruitless expenditure. And then the next one, I think the next two, those are the qualifying matters that we had, and consist in the financials that have just been concluded. They are still a challenge, and as I highlighted, we are implementing measures. However, those measures have not as yet given us the proper assurance that we are properly accounting for irregular. And also in the next slide, it's the second one around the immovable tangible assets. So those are the two major areas that we are focusing on, given that in 2 succession years, though we would have put in place measures, but those measures have not matured properly, such that we are able to disclose irregular expenditure and also tangible immovable assets accurately in our financials. So that's the progress in terms of the key areas that were identified in 1920. The next part is just to brief the committee on the status of consequence management. When the department came to the portfolio committee to present the plan following the conclusion of the 1920 audit outcome, there was irregular expenditure that was identified also by the AG. And as a department, we have a responsibility of investigating all those irregular contracts. So there were contracts that were investigated, about 24 of them. In February, the investigation had completed. However, the implementation of the recommendation had not happened. So I'm just going to then provide an update in terms of then the implementation of those recommendations in terms of those contracts where investigation had completed. The first is around 13 tenders. These were contracts to the total value of 866 million, where the investigation was done. And the finding of that investigation was that these tenders, all of them, there was no evidence and indication of presence of any favoritism or any fraudulent motive, which were done by members of either the BEC or also the BAC. So therefore, the department did not suffer any losses. And as a result, the department, out of those contracts, derived value in those contracts. However, the challenge mainly in them being irregular was mainly around the objectivity factor, which the CFO will go into details. There was therefore a recommendation that as a department, we need to ensure that we improve on SCM procedures and also because we derived value and we've gone through investigation, we need then to take disciplinary steps or corrective measures to ensure that officials do not again repeat the same offense in as far as these contracts are concerned. And that was done whereby as a department, we 36 officials were involved in these tenders. We had to then provide counseling for these officials, and the counseling mainly is to highlight where they were wrong. And a number of officials highlighted that, you know, it is always good that they are given refresher courses in as far as some of these SEM processes are concerned. And in this case, some of them were not necessarily familiar with the requirements of the legislation. And as a result, we also then had to take those officials through a training, which is still ongoing. The SEM processes also and procedures, and especially around evaluation criteria, have been improved, because that's where we were found wanting. We're not explicit in terms of the way in which we evaluated these contracts, such that there was no objectivity in the manner in which these contracts were actually evaluated. We have sent through an application to National Treasury following then the conclusion of the disciplinary process for condonement. National Treasury has raised questions of which we have looked into those areas of concern, and we have then also resubmitted to ensure that the whole condonation submission is indeed complete. The next slide talks to 5 contracts that were also concluded in terms of investigation. And these were to the value of 135 million. And in this case, in these contracts, there were findings where one of them was around the bid evaluation committees in terms of these tenders failed to apply due care when they were evaluating, and they overlooked certain irregularities. And the irregularities in this instance is ensuring that documents that are provided are documents that are certified, or where we require a tax clearance, you need to have a tax clearance, and so on and so forth. And so these were identified as irregular, given that certain elements were overlooked. And therefore, then there was also then a recommendation of the department improving the SCM procedures in order to deal with these, and it was mainly around capacitating and skilling and upskilling officials, which is currently ongoing, and initiate disciplinary process, because here there was an element of having overlooked and also not have taken the responsibility that you have when you sit in these committees, where you really need to exercise due care in as far as evaluation is concerned. The status of that is that 5 officials were issued with final written warning. And I have then also highlighted the levels of those officials who were issued with written warnings. And also we had 3 that were issued with written warning. And I've also then highlighted the various levels of those that were issued with warnings. There were 2 officials that were found guilty, and they went through a disciplinary process with a presiding officer who is independent from the department. And upon conclusion of that disciplinary, they have recommendations, which then as a department we need to implement, where then that official that was found guilty had to be suspended for 3 months without pay, in as far as that is concerned. We still have disciplinary cases that are still in process in this matter, but I think I have inquired on part of this. It involves about about seven officials, and I've highlighted that on the side. There is one of the cases where two officials at level 14 are involved, has been finalized. We're just waiting for the final recommendation from the presiding officer so that we then can take action. The unfortunate part, Honorable Chair, about areas where you have not concluded disciplinary process, you cannot send then the contracts to National Treasury for condonement. Having have covered all the steps up to taking corrective measures, but also instituting tighter internal controls. So in this case, given that these officials that are still going through disciplinary process, the cases have not been concluded, we have not been able to request for condonement from National Treasury. But we are quite hopeful, given that the major one with the two officials has already been concluded, and we are waiting for the sanction that needs to be implemented in relation to that. The next slide talks to about 3 tenders of a total value of 379 million, where there were findings. And the first finding was that the investigation found that there was a Mafaki evidence illustrating elements of preferential treatment to selected bidders that were there. And also 2 of the tenders, there was also evidence that there's an official that would have committed fraud. And also the remaining tender which were affected here, there was no, because it's separate, it's 3 of them. The last one, there was no evidence indicating the presence of favoritism. So as a department, it was recommended that we must immediately open a case, a criminal case, where there was prima facie evidence, and also institute disciplinary action, where then there would have been some form of favoritism and also preferential treatment that was given to certain service provider, and also applying for condonement, but that can only happen once you are done with the whole process up to disciplinary action and it has taken place. So that is still not done. And also around implementation of the improvement of SEM. Compliance with laws and regulation on supply chain management has been a common finding across all these investigations done. As a department, and I think Member Bryant raised this issue in the morning, in relation to the case that we have opened, where we highlighted that there's 14 officials that were actually implicated, and I've already highlighted it's in the next presentation, but I think he also pointed that one out. And the case that was opened, it related to mainly fraud, and also there was evidence that there was backdating and fabrication of certain documents, and also some form of collusion within the bid evaluation committee in terms of then identifying the successful bidder. That's why then with that, we then had to open a case, and this case is still being investigated by the criminal investigation unit. Upon inquiring from SAPS, they had indicated that they are making progress in the matter. However, the investigation is still ongoing in as far as this is concerned. There was therefore, outside those 14, there was one official that was issued with a final written warning, and 6 had to be cancelled. In as far as this, because they would have received potentially an instruction to say change this minutes, backdate, give this date, and so on and so forth. And basically the cancelled officials, we've highlighted them there, the 6, and also the one that got a final written warning. However, the case of 14 officials is still pending with the criminal investigation unit. The next one, which I think is the last, Honorable Chair, is 3 contracts that amounted to a 903 million, where the case, in fact, the previous case and this case are related, given that the officials would also, the ones that are impacted on the other one, were also impacted on these tenders. As a result, you would see that the recommendation of us then reporting the case, and also where there were a clear sense of fraud, then there was precautionary suspension that was actually implemented on some of the officials. And 6 of, in fact, it's 8 officials in this case, where all of them were suspended immediately. There was precautionary suspension of all 8 officials. However, upon having investigated 2, there was a lifting up of the suspension, given that they were not necessarily directly involved, and 6 remained officials. The 2 of the 6, they are still ongoing in terms of the disciplinary matter. So it relates to a disciplinary process that is still ongoing, which we are hoping it has been finalized. There is one case where we had to commence. However, unfortunately, we then had an indication of the employer's representative not being available. So now we are then making sure that we identify another employer representative within the public service. That's what we normally do as guided by DPSA. And then the case is definitely going to, the disciplinary case is definitely going to start being implemented. And one official was suspended for 3 months without pay in this case. And obviously the case, which I've already alluded to, Chairperson, is still ongoing in as far as this. So that covers the update on consequence management that have taken place thus far. These are just areas which were identified in that audit and the progress that we have made. It was indicated in February that the department needs to revise its functionality criteria for tenders such that there is compliance to the triple PFA, because that was one of the key elements that were overlooked in these contracts, and therefore they were found to be irregular. We've implemented that with effect from the 1st of April 2020. And also the other one was on officials that are serving in the various committees. I think where we are also found wanting in those irregular contracts, an official will be involved in see and also be involved in BEC. So there is no different review of the decisions that would have been taken at one level, and there was no segregation of duties.
DG, we have lost you. DG, is it only me who has lost him? Colleagues, can you hear?
No, we've lost her.
Sure.
She's gone.
DG, can somebody from the department alert that we've lost her?
I'm doing so, Chairperson. I'm doing so. It's gift PLO.
Okay. Where's the CFO? CFO?
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. I can take over.
Sitting in her boots and continue while she's coming back.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
John. Thank you.
Okay. I think that the DG was still on the progress made on SEM improvements. On the third one, I think it was still around the implementation of our records. Previously, we were found wanting by AG, whereby we could not even produce evidence as to the proceedings of the committees, that is the bid specification committees and the bid evaluation committees. That has since been done. We have improved our processes in that regard, whereby at least what we can say has assisted us with the virtual and the hybrid model that we're using. We have recordings that we are using on Teams. And then on the skills development in the SEM unit, on this one, Honorable Chairperson, we can say it's still work in progress. We still have challenges on this one, and we are working on capacitating the unit, because as much as the department grew, the administrative part of the department on the SAM side never grew to accommodate the size of the procurement plan of the department. However, we have appointed the Director Acquisition and Demand with effect from 1st of September. And now we just concluded the appointment of the Director Demand Management, and of which we are anticipating that a person might start at the beginning of December, because all the processes have been done. If not, maybe beginning of January. Training in a form of workshops have been conducted to all the SCM staff, and it's still ongoing, because even with our end users, that is the programs that we are dealing with in assisting to improve the operations of the department, that is still ongoing, to ensure that we assist even all the committee members that are sitting in the specifications and the evaluations. So that is still ongoing, and that will assist us in improving the irregular expenditure that we have, and ensuring that moving forward, the criteria of the bids that we do award are meeting the standards in terms of the triple PFA of 2017. We can move to the next slide. Okay, I think that's it on the implementation of the audit action plan as it was presented by the DG. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Okay, and she was going to hand over to you to talk to the audit action plan. Can you do that? I know that's what she was going to do immediately when she finishes.
Okay.
Proceed. Sure.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson and the honorable members. If we can move to the other presentation that we submitted on the audit action plan, I can start there. I think I will start on slide, yes, that one. The DG has taken us through some of the areas. We can move to the next slide. These are the areas that the department was qualified on in 2020-21. Mainly it's on irregular expenditure and immovable tangible assets. And I will go into details as to what we are doing as the department up until now. Next slide. Mainly, Honorable Chairperson and the members, the challenges that we experienced as the department was the lack of the review of the financial statements prior to the submission to AG. We will recall that the DG indicated that the last audit for 1920 was only finalized on the 23rd of December. And as a result, the department could not implement the recommendations that were even suggested by the AG. And that also prolonged all the processes that needed to take place. And as a result, we submitted the financial statements to AG without following proper review processes. However, what we have done is that we have developed a plan of ensuring that there is a clear annual financial statements preparation plan with clear timelines that has been workshopped and adopted by all the finance managers to ensure that we're going to adhere to those in preparation for the 2021-2022 financial year. So far, we have been having issues with preparing and submitting the interim financial statements. However, up until now, on the 12th of November, we have submitted the Q2 interim financial statements to National Treasury. That will assist us ensuring that we are improving our control environment, we are improving our accuracy level of what we are disclosing. Of course, on this one, Honorable Chairperson, there will be challenges because it's something that we have not been doing. However, the processes that we are putting in place was that at least we managed to meet the deadline. We submitted and prepared the Q2 interim financial statements. Then on the other challenge that we experienced was the delays that I alluded to earlier on the finalization of the audit. What we have done here is that we will continue preparing our quarterly financial statements, and as a result, our internal audit as the external assurance provider has been engaged and will be auditing our Q3 financial statements, looking at the control environment and looking at the measures in place that we have put in preparation of the financial statements. We have had an engagement with AG, where they will assist the department. They will come to the management meeting on the 29th of November to address the entire management team, because like the minister has indicated that previously there was a culture that the financial statements are just the CFO's office responsibility. So now the AG will table all the root causes that led us to this situation so that each and every branch is equipped and is in process of preparing for the annual financial statements. So that workshop will take place on the 29th of November, where the AG will come and address us on what led to the root causes and what are the action that needs to be taken by the department in ensuring that we're improving the status quo. And as a result of that, AG, in the engagements that we will have, because they indicated that they were still finalizing the MFMA processes, then there will be formal engagements to meet with the DG and the management of the department to assist us with the interim audit so that we can prepare for the 2021-22 financial statements. Next slide. So those are the challenges mainly that we faced, Honorable Chairperson and the members. And then on this slide, we are just highlighting the key areas that made us to be qualified once again. I think that the DG went into detail on the irregular expenditure, and then on the capital commitments, I will talk through when I'm looking at the audit action plan in the outer slides that I'm going to talk to. However, I just need to emphasize on the second last ones that we had an issue with. It's also on the PPP that involves the environmental house that we are residing in at the moment. We had issues with the disclosure in that regard. And this one is a bit, it's technical in nature. And as a result, we have engaged the Office of the Accountant General in National Treasury to come and assist us on how to account for this, because it's something new that is coming in this financial year. All along, as the department, we have been accounting for this transaction as a finance lease. However, this financial year is in 2020-21 financial year, AG came on board and indicated that it should be accounted for as operating leases. So on this one, it's technical. There are engagements that we are having with the Office of the Accountant General to assist us on this one. And then on the capital work in progress, I will go into detail when I'm talking about the actual audit plan that we have put in place. We can move to the next slide. I think this one, the DG went into detail on the irregular expenditure breakdown. What has happened here is that since 2017-2018 financial year, we had a lot of numerous tenders that were regarded to be non-compliant. And as a result, if we continue to spend, as and when we continue to spend on non-compliant contracts, that results in irregular expenditure. And in order for irregular expenditure to be submitted to National Treasury for condonation, there has to be processes that are followed, and there has to be processes that have been fully implemented in order for National Treasury to consider on this one. But on the next slide, I will demonstrate per financial year as to how many contracts is on this one, how many contracts the department entered into which were non-compliant, and the contract value and the expenditure that has been incurred in those contracts. If we look on this slide, as at the end of March 2021, we have disclosed an accumulated balance of 4.3 billion. If you look at the table, you will only see 4.172 billion. However, the other is just minor issues that related to petty cash matters and non-adherence to delegations of authority. Yes, they are not minor in nature. There is a process that we are also looking at in ensuring that in fact, the delegations of authority have been reviewed and signed off by the DG with effect from August this year to ensure that that communication is going through to everyone in the department. People know what they are delegated to sign on. So the 4.3 billion that we reported at the end of the financial year 2020-21 was as a result of the non-compliant contracts that we entered into, and as and when we make payments, that results in irregular expenditure. However, in the next slides, I will talk through the implementation or the action plan that we have put in place. This is just a demonstration on the breakdown of the non-compliant contracts that we have as the department since 2017-2018 financial year. We can move to the next slide. On this one, Honorable Chairperson and the members, I think this is the start of the action plan that we have put in place. When it comes to the annual financial statements that were reported by AG to have been produced or having had material misstatements, as a result, the AG reported that we did not comply or we did not prepare our financial statements in line with the applicable accounting standards. On this one, like I have indicated, as a start of as the beginning of the actual practical implementation of the audit action plan, we have submitted the Q2 financial statements. It is a process. I need to indicate that to the honorable members. However, we have started to ensure that we are putting processes in place, and the plan that we have developed and workshopped with the managers to assist with all the processes, because we rely on everyone to gather in the information, and the department is huge, relying on the information from the regions in order to ensure that we have credible financial statements. However, this at least has been initiated and started. And then if we move to the assets, this is mainly on capital tangible assets, where we had issues with the classification of assets, and we ended up capitalizing entire expenditure instead of splitting it to what contributes to the capital expenditure, the consumables, minor assets, and inventory. We ended up, when we accounted for everything, we capitalized everything. And then as a result of that, AG came and indicated that we are overstating our immovable capital assets. On this one, it is a process that we are undertaking with program managers, where we are indicating that we need to review our processes thoroughly and ensure that we conduct a detailed analysis, and we inform the program managers the importance of verifying the project status, the costs that are linked, so that on our side, we can account for that expenditure accordingly. This one, I think even the DG indicated earlier on, that it also involves the service providers in the manner in which they invoice the department, because if they lump everything in the invoice and in finance, we just pay everything, that's where the challenges emanate in us only accounting for that expenditure as part of what needs to be capitalized. So it's a process that we are also involving the service providers on. There's tangible assets were the ones that are around the regions throughout the country, and therefore that is the process that we are in a process of ensuring that we complete it before the end of the financial year. Then the other area that we had an issue on was on the asset register, the incompleteness of the asset register, whereby AG indicated that we do not maintain our asset register, and that leads to assets when AG went on the ground to verify those assets, they could not locate them. However, in the asset register, we have accounted for them. We have started a process as at the end of the Q3 of doing an asset verification for the department. However, on this one, I must indicate that it's still work in progress because we are experiencing challenges with the assets that were transferred from the former Department of Agriculture to the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment. And as a result, that part we are still ongoing. It's still an ongoing process. We are still verifying those assets. However, we have started now and will ensure that at least the process is completed by the end of the financial year. We will also, we have already consulted internal audit to assist us with the verification process that has been followed, so that at least that there are processes in place in ensuring that we recognize and account for our assets correctly. But like I'm saying, it's still work in progress because it involves all the regions throughout the country in ensuring that we account for our assets accordingly. Then if you can move to the next slide. On slide number 9, I think this is where the DG went into detail on the irregular expenditure. It's work in progress. However, what we can highlight on this one is that we have put in place processes to ensure that there is adequate and appropriate review processes and ensure that there is compliance to laws and regulations in compliance matters that relate to the procurement value chain. However, it's also still work in progress, but we have capacitated our SCM staff members and the end users in the form of training that took place or that is still taking place in the form of a workshop. Over and above that, our bid committees, which looks into the bid specifications and the bid evaluations, have also been equipped in a form of training just for the committees to assist or to be in a position to assess all the regulations that lead to non-compliance. This is one of the measures that we are putting in place to ensure that we prevent the irregular expenditure. And then we have reviewed the standard operating procedures so that at least we can have processes in place to guide all the committees that were found wanting, like the DG indicated when she was presenting that counseling process that took place was also, it also brought light that the staff members needed the basic trainings in order for them to conduct the duties that are required in those committees. We are continuously reviewing the information on the financial systems because that is one thing that also led to the incompleteness that was reported by AG, because mainly on this one, AG highlighted that the information, as much as we know that certain contracts were non-compliant, however, we were not reporting them as irregular expenditure. So we are putting in place processes to ensure that as and when we pay against the non-compliant contract, we report and we record the irregular expenditure against those contracts so that it's not AG who comes on board and indicate that our expenditure is non-compliant. We can be in a position to report it upfront up until all the processes have been completed and we are submitting the condonation processes to National Treasury. We can move to the next slide. And then on the expenditure is also linked to the capital tangible assets that I spoke about earlier on, where we had issues with the classification. Instead of classifying the expenditure as goods and services, in certain instances we classified it as capital expenditure. So on this one, I think what we are doing is that we are in a process of engaging project managers to ensure that the entire population is looked into, and we in future we account for the expenditure against the nature of that expense. And then this is one of the non-compliant matters that we had as a department, where we were found wanting for not paying the service providers within 30 days. On this one, we are in a process of piloting. We are in a process of implementing an automated integrated procure-to-pay tool, so that it also assists us with the turnaround times and also assists us with the document, with the record keeping, because mainly what the department is still lacking on is our document, our record keeping processes. So with the automated processes, at least it will assist us in ensuring that we retrieve documents as and when required by aging. And then on the PPP, the public-private partnership that I spoke about, next slide. This one is mainly on the building that we're occupying. Like I indicated earlier on, it's very technical in nature. It requires the use of the experts in the form of actuaries, so that we can be in a position to reasonably estimate the appropriateness of the model that we use when we are accounting for it. We in engagement with the Office of the Accountant General at National Treasury to ensure that by the time we prepare the financial statement, at least this part should be resolved and should be attended to. It is a process. Like I said, it's technical in nature. However, we are looking at the use of the experts in ensuring that we account for this one properly. And then if we move to the next slide. The next slide is the demonstration of what we reported in the financial statement as at the end of 31 March per program. Mainly, we had challenges with, we had underspending in Program 1, Program 6, and Program 7, and Program 8. As a result, the department spent 83.5 in the financial year that we just concluded now. On Program 1, mainly the challenge was around the underspending was around the implications of COVID-19, where we could not travel abroad and we had to cancel communication events, and that resulted in that program underspending. And we underspent by 12.5% in that regard. And then on Program 6, we underspent by 1 billion. And this was mainly due to presidential stimulus program expenditure, that where we had challenges in our procurement processes, and that process took long before the end of the financial year. I must indicate to the Honorable Chairperson and the members that it's still a challenge even in this financial year, the issue of the underspending. And it's a process that we are looking at up until the department matures on the controls that we have put in place to prevent the irregular expenditure. This might have an inverse relationship. But on Program 7, we underspent by 210 million, and also the challenges experienced there were delays in the procurement processes, and in certain instances there were cancellations that were made on the tenders that we advertised. And as a result, when we closed the financial year, we could not spend those funds that were appropriated. And then on Program 8, Forestry, we also underspent there by 77 million, mainly due to COVID-19 restrictions that impacted on the operations of the plantations. And as a result of that, we closed the financial year having spent 83.5% of the budget that was allocated and appropriated for that financial year. We can move to the next slide. Okay, I think I've spoken to the narrative of the underspending. We can move to the next slide. Then what we are doing as strategies to improve the spending in the 2021-22 financial year is that as the department, we hold weekly bid adjudication meetings to assess the terms of reference that have been submitted for adverts, and to adjudicate over the bids that have been evaluated. That happens on a weekly basis. And it also assists us in monitoring the procurement plan of the department, because most of majority of the adjudication members is the DDGs, and it's chaired by the CFO. So it also is a strategy that we are putting in place to ensure that we do monitor the procurement plan on a regular basis. However, on this one, it's still work in progress, because I indicated earlier on that we still have capacity constraints in the SCM space, and it's something that we are working on in ensuring that we improve even the spending in the current financial year. We are also looking, we are busy with the research on different sourcing models so that we don't delay service delivery, but we are looking at measures that are compliant and that are in line with laws and regulations. Over and above that, what we do is that we equip the program managers, as they are non-financial managers. We equip them on a monthly basis, whereby we indicate what has been appropriated to them and what have been spent so far, so that they can be in a position to assess and align the spending with the targets in the APP, and ensure that as a department we achieve what we have indicated that we will deliver on the APP. And then we can move to the next slide. I think on the following slides, the DG has indicated intensively on the consequence management that has been that are taking in place in the department. Over and above the irregular expenditure, we also have fruitless and wasteful expenditure. As much as it's not drastic increasing, but it is a concern, because it's an indication that it's money that was spent in vain. On this one, I think we can move to the next slide. Okay, the DG spoke about this one. You can move. On the fruitless and wasteful expenditure, the department has appointed a service provider that will assist the department with the determination, because if you look at the magnitude of all the contracts coming from 17-18 financial year, it's a lot of contract that needed to be assessed. So the department undertook a route to appoint a service provider to assist us with all those cases, meaning the cases for irregular expenditure and fruitless and wasteful expenditure, so that the department can be in a position to fast track and either refer those cases for investigation if there is element of fraud. Then if there is none, then there can be a process of fast tracking the application for condonement. The service provider started in October, and have been appointed for about 6 months to assist us with fast tracking everything that was regarded as irregular in the previous financial years, and to ensure that we maintain what the controls that we are still intensifying of ensuring that we do not prevent further irregular expenditure. So that is something that is still being done in the department to ensure that we fast track the submissions to National Treasury. Like the DG indicated, we have made some submissions already. However, National Treasury indicated, that was even before the service provider started, National Treasury indicated concerns and challenges in the submission. And as a result, we are still finalizing all those areas to ensure that we submit credible information for National Treasury to consider the condonation on the irregular expenditure that has been reported. And then if you can move to the other slide. On this one, I think the AG in the morning indicated that they have not fully implemented or rolled out the implementation of the PAA. However, they have raised to the department the risks that may be posed to the department when it comes to this. As a result, we are starting to put remedial actions to ensure that we look at the entire contract management register to ensure that the expenditure that we are reporting on as we have derived value on. So the actions have been put in place on this one to ensure that when the AG finally fully implements the PAA, at least there have been some processes and steps that the department is undertaking in this regard. I think that's it on my side, Honorable Chairperson. As a conclusion, we are saying that as the department, we are committed to ensure that we improve the status quo We are putting in place measures and controls to ensure that we comply, and we are ready. We have implemented the issue of the preparation of the quarterly financial statements and the monitoring of the audit action plans, even with our oversight assurance bodies like the legal, the risk, the internal audit, and the audit committees, so that they can assist us in ensuring that whatever we are putting in place is indeed addressing the root cause and may not result in the recurrence of the findings. And I think I indicated earlier on that even AG will be coming on board to assist us in identifying the root causes for the department and ensuring that each and every one is including or the control environment is embedded in our day-to-day activities, because whatever we do on a regular basis is the one that gets to be reported when we submit our annual financial statements. Thank you so much, Honorable Chairperson and the members. That's it on my side. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, CFO. I hope the DG is reconnected. That's my thinking.
Yes, I am, Chair.
Okay, Minister, are we done? Or is any other thing that the Minister want to add before we allow the members to raise issues?
No, thanks, Chairperson. I think that the team has given a comprehensive overview. We will respond to questions.
Thank you so much, Minister. Colleagues, can I then see a show of hands of the colleagues who want to interact with all these presentations as presented? For now, let me note Honorable Weben, then you be followed by Honorable Bryant. Those are the two hands that I'm seeing in the meantime. Can I give you an opportunity, Honorable Weber?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, colleagues. I think what I have is more comments and maybe some pointers that I would like to share. I think record keeping is the serious problem here. That's the basis of everything. And if one looks at the number of people that actually has cases against them, and in the beginning I thought it might just be skills development and you've put that on your action plan. But yes, my question to that is, what is the time to a disciplinary hearing? And secondly, what is the criteria? If you suspend someone and the consequence management is, okay, you suspend someone for 3 months without pay, and this person is coming back, was the problem skills development, or is it purely the person is taking chances? I do think we need to distinguish between these two, because one's working with money and being in the supply chain management. If you have a serial offender, I believe someone can get one chance in finances, and then that person should probably always try chances. So I do think if it's skills development is the problem, yes, you can sort that out. But if it's the other one, and trying to relax, I think someone like that, a consequence like that might not be possible. That is just my opinion about that. But I want to say thank you to the board, to you for being so transparent. And then my one other question is, I would like to know the name of the service provider, and that will be there for 6 months. And then, sorry, I just have to go through my notes here. Yes, I would like to know, I know a disciplinary can take sometimes much longer, but especially with our people in the 13 and 14 people here and the 16 people there and the 8 people here, how long will disciplinaries take? We cannot have a year-long disciplinary for people and they're out of their job while the disciplinary goes on, or we trust them to go ahead with that. And my last comment is just, I like your action plan. I think it will work as long as it is implemented and it goes on. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Can I hand over to Honorable Bryant?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Can I just start by saying a thank you to the Minister for being so open and honest in her introduction at the beginning of the presentations. It is very refreshing, and I do think that none of us want to be sitting here throwing barbs and brickbats, but I think there is a level of disappointment amongst members of the committee that more has not been achieved up till now. But having said that, the presentations that were given and the level of detail, in particular around consequence management, but around other aspects as well, are very appreciated. And I would like to just thank the officials concerned and the Minister for going to those extra lengths as well to ensure that we've had more detailed information during the course of the day. At the end of the day, we are dealing with money that is meant to be spent in the best interests of all South Africans, and it's imperative that we ensure that every cent is accounted for and that it's being spent in order to improve the lives of all South Africans. A couple of points. Firstly, just in terms of the officials that attended the counselling processes, I take it that their individual performance is going to be proactively monitored going forward to ensure that they don't reoffend at a later stage. What we wouldn't want is for a similar scenario to occur again at a later stage. So I just want to ensure that there is going to be that proactive monitoring. And then also, whether or not the hiring process itself for some of these positions is possibly going to be looked at once vacancies arrive, because it does appear, if one has in the one instance 36 officials that seemingly were unable to fulfill their sort of job requirements, whether perhaps there is something within the recruitment process itself that could be improved upon. In terms of the underspend, just the chemicals and waste management aspect that was sitting at around about 65%, can I just get some feedback as to why that was so low? If that had anything to do with the lockdowns, or what the reasoning was behind that particular underspend. And then I'm also intrigued in terms of the ideas for improving spending. If the official could perhaps expand on the proposed different sourcing models, what's envisaged there, and what she means by different sourcing models, what that would encompass. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you so much, Honorable Brent. So far, those are the two hands I could recognize. Can I hand over to the department to respond, then I will come back later. Over to the department.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to request that I be assisted in responding to these questions, especially around the human resource disciplinary procedures, the time it takes, and also those that would have gone through counseling. How do we proactively ensure that they are monitored and there's no reoccurrence? I'm going to request the DDG CMS to assist me on that. And then service provider and the sourcing models. CFO, I think you can then be in a position to assist on that. And I'm going to just request DDG Chemicals and Waste to talk to the 65%. Yeah, I think those are the key matters. Through your chair, can I request DDG CMS Ms. Mashala to respond? Thank you.
Thanks, Chairperson and DG. In terms of the disciplinary process, it is expected to take 90 days for a disciplinary process. However, in this particular instance, we have taken longer than it was anticipated, and the reason was the numbers and the magnitude of the disciplinary process that which we had to deal with at a same time. The numbers that which we have had, given the resources that which we have departmentally in terms of the planning for this particular disciplinary processes, took longer than it was anticipated. But the legislative process is 90 days. And hence we are currently sitting at the numbers that which we have. In terms of what we are doing to ensure that the problem does not recur, there are two main issues, especially for those that which we have had counseling. CFO has identified that as part of the counseling processes, there were elements of skills. And in that specific regard, there are processes that which are being implemented in as far as skills development is concerned on the latest developments in the legislation and policies, specifically on SCM. But there are also, we have put in measures to review performance agreements, which we are rigorously monitoring on a biannual basis to ensure that there's no recurrence and there is continuous reporting in that regard. On the recruitment measures, we have implemented processes aligned to the DPSA, inclusive of which was to do an analysis in terms of the qualification of the senior management services members to determine that they actually met the entry requirements in terms of this particular post. But the elements in terms of competency assessment are also being looked into to ensure that wherein there are gaps that which are identified, we also put personal development programs to close out the gaps that which have been identified in the performance development areas in that regard. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. DG, who's next?
The Chemicals and Waste Ddg.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. In terms of the underspending, mainly it was attributed to the reprioritization that we had to do, taking some of the funds from our recycling enterprise support program and directing it towards the relief, COVID-19 waste picker relief. What delayed us in spending, it's because we didn't have systems. First, we needed to ensure that we know who these waste pickers are. The registration thereof was delayed because we needed to first put the system on board. And the system also had to have controls linking with Home Affairs such that we know we are paying real people, and also linking it to the National Treasury Safety Web System. So those delays, because we had to put the controls first led to the delay. And also making use of the RT contracts. The relief also included getting the waste pickers protective equipment, and those RT contracts, there were a lot of demand put on them, so the service providers couldn't supply the delivery of the PPE on time, so it led to us underspending. However, since we have managed to pay over 10,000 waste pickers, it's not everybody that came forward because there were specific requirements that they need to meet. So even for our estimates, given that we know that there are about 60,000 of them, only about 14,000 came forward with requested documents. The others could not be meeting, or they didn't want to come forward for one reason or the other. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. Who's next?
It's the CFO, and then we are done, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. CFO.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson and the members. I think on my side, the question was mainly on the different sourcing models that we are making a research on. What we are doing is that before the end of the financial year, what we will do is to look at the procurement plan of the department and assess it and look at the common commodities and see whether as a department we can form term contracts in place so that we don't go out on a regular basis looking for different bids. We can use those term contracts, assessing the entire procurement plan and looking at the common commodities. So we're looking into that. And then over and above that, it's making use of the transversal contracts that have been put in place by National Treasury. So that happens when we assess, when we do have time and assess that the procurement plan upfront before the beginning of the financial year, in order to ensure that we are making use, we're deriving economic benefits on what government has out in place. Over and above that, what we have been doing as the department is that as much as there are certain activities that are done by by government entities, we will find ourselves going out on a tender, knowing exactly that there is a government entity that has that specific commodity or that specific service in place. So the research that we are looking at is to ensure that we do comply. We are not found wanting with AG when they come on board, and we are being told that it's non-compliant. So that is the research that we are busy with, so that when we start, even in the next financial year, we just implement deliver on the procurement plan. So those are the research that we are still working on, so that we find a workable solution to ensure that we have different sourcing strategies and we comply to laws and regulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I check if I have other colleagues whose hands are up? Honorable Bryant, is it a follow-up question?
Sorry, Chair, I think there's two questions we didn't answer.
Okay.
DG, there was a question about the colleague who was given 3-month salary suspension as a consequence of the disciplinary hearing. And I think that it might be important to explain, because Honourable Weber, I asked this question myself, and what was explained to me was that because this person was at SMS level, the disciplinary process is an external independent process. It was,
Minister, if you can put a video on their channels, the communication team is on my case. Parliamentary one. Thank you. Sure.
Sorry, Chair. What I was saying is that I had raised the same question that Honourable Weber raised when this matter was brought to my attention. And what I was told is that because the staff member concerned is at SMS level, the disciplinary process is an external process with an external chair who makes an external finding and a sentence. And therefore, we needed to accept that situation. I think that DG or CFO, if they can't answer the question that was raised about who is the service provider, then I think we should take that and get the information and respond in writing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. I want to check if, there's a hand by Honorable Weber again. I think
actually, that was just a thank you for the Minister and everyone else's answer.
Oh, she has answered you. Thank you, Honorable Weber. Then can we deal with the issue around the AG report, colleagues? We want you to comment on the issue around your office accommodation arrangements through the triple PP, because the AG found that questionable, partly because of the single payment amounting to 157.49 million and the operational cost about 6.2 million during 2019-20 financial year. And then the AG also flagged how yourselves are reporting the triple PP arrangement, that it was not in line with the accounting standards. And then this matter was to be discussed with the Office of the Accountant General for an assessment to ensure proper disclosure in future periods. Then the department should update us as a committee on the status of this triple P and the progress whether the accounting was corrected. The other issue that one has then picked up as I was reading all those documents, Minister, that you sent to me for me to catch up, was in relation to the biological forestry plantations. When you look through your previous report, these have consistently resulted in a qualified audit opinion in the previous financial years. Then when you read the 2020-21 annual report, in particular on page 16, you yourself as the department, you are stating that the Section 42 process in terms of the PFMA for the transfer of these biological assets, it's still outstanding. On the contrary, if you watch the proceeding of the Portfolio Committee of the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development on the 9th of November, they stated it categorically that their audit outcomes were improved due to the transfer of the biological assets. Maybe CFO and DG should explain these contradictions between the reporting by officials from the Agriculture Department and yourselves on the transfer of biological products. Maybe you can also explain who's the current custodian of these biological assets. Is it true that the transfer process is complete? So these are the issues that we want to get clarity from your side on the issue of the AG. Then I think the other issue that one wants to get clarity is with regard to your program, Fisheries Management. There was a daily Maverick report in 2020 around October. This talking about abalone poachers. The minister tell me that it's a very precious fish. Yeah. Then there was a report there around wherein the Daily Maverick reported that community members in places such as Claremont are transitioning to poaching, which they consider to be a peaceful form of livelihood that contributes positively to the communities. And then one wants to understand the level of cooperation between the department and fishing communities in keeping illegal fishing. And then the issue there also is that to what extent has the department progressed in implementing the alternative livelihood strategy and which communities are involved. The issue that, this is the issue that one want to also get clarity on. The other critical issue on those issues is around the department which is conducting the verification of right holders on an annual basis. And then I believe you have not yet reported to the committee on your findings. Maybe the question that can come there is to say, what were the verification findings during the year under review? And then the other issue around that, you have missed your target of finalizing the fisheries policy in preparation for the allocation of the commercial fishing rights. Maybe one will have to understand how much progress have you made in the FRAP process since the end of December is around the corner. So these are some of the issues that one would like to raise in relation to the fishery program. On the forestry management, I think I've raised that issue about the biological plants, but then there is an issue also that one want to raise with regard to the issue around the temporary unplanted areas in the department's category B and C plantation, which remains high. Then when you look at this, in 2019-20, the department planted 551.5 hectares instead of 945 hectares in TUPs. Now, on this year under review, you didn't plant even a single hectare. That then it means then you've missed this critical deliverable of planting trees in 1,279 hectares of the land in its entirety. Then when one looks at your proposal remedial action, you are there to remove the annual target of planting trees in TUPs due to supply chain complication, erratic rainfall patterns, and limited time for implementation. Can then the DDG responsible for forestry management explain the reasons for blaming supply chain processes and limited time for planting? Because at face value, the provided reasons could reflect poor planning on the side of the department and cannot be a justification for dropping the targets. The department should also maybe provide a sound and rational remedial action. Can also the DDG responsible for forestry management update the committee on the current extent of temporary unplanted areas in the country and the breakdown to the provincial level? So then that's the issue that one wants to understand from the DDG responsible for forestry management. With regard to the DDG responsible for chemicals and waste management, there's a report that is coming from the South African Medical Research Council, wherein they did the study in the 2 landfill sites in Gauteng. And then they found that waste pickers suffer from respiratory illness, which means cough at 46.8%, breathlessness at 19.6%, and rapid breathing at 15.8%. Then it also relates to injuries, traumas, and mental disorders. So I want the DDG responsible for chemicals and waste management to talk to us on this issue and tell us to what extent is the department collaborating with sister departments to address these social health and economic challenges faced by waste pickers. I believe this is not a case only alone in Gauteng. It might be an isolated incident. Throughout the country, you might find that there are similar instances of such nature. Then the issue that one want to add on what Honorable Bryant has raised with regard to climate change, equality, and sustainable development. When you go through your reports, one of the missed targets is the publication of the 2018 State of the Forest report due to delays in printing and publication. And then the question that comes in then, with all these available platforms and the ICT that is available, what has then stopped the department from publishing the report online? So these are the issues that one would like to talk to, but also lastly to the DG who's responsible for corporate services. There are issues that then you had to blame lockdown restrictions that were associated with level 4 and level 5 with regard to a filling of critical vacant posts. Maybe the DDG corporate services must then deal with this issue to say, what has been the major limiting factor in filling all these posts in the presence of technology? We have been able to hold Zoom meetings from where I'm seated. The same thing could have happened, Zoom interviews, but there may be the DDG corporate services will be able to deal with that. Also, maybe for the DDG corporate to also maybe explain it to us for the difference of the 263 posts that create confusion in the vacancy rate of 6.6% and 13%. So the last one then will be with regard to the DDG responsible for oceans and coasts. It's with regard to the delay in the finalization of the Aquaculture Development Bill that also have affected the delivery on Program 3, Oceans Economic Master Plan. In general, these are the issues that has to deal with the limited exposure to people from inland communities on the opportunities presented by the oceans. And then when you look at the 2021 inaugural Economic Skills Summit, which identified 6 focus areas that have to be achieved by 2033, however, it remains unclear what the medium-term targets that will be monitored. Maybe you need to outline the requirement enabling conditions and the associated short to medium targets that will contribute towards the skill development and the entrepreneurship to that effect. Over to you, DG and Tim.
Chair, through you, Chair, can I make a suggestion that all the questions that pertain to fisheries, those questions are answered when we deal with the Marine Living Resources Act, the Marine Living Resources Fund, which is the next item on our agenda. Because I think, I'm sure DDG Middleton has noted them. But otherwise, let me hand over to the Director General so that she can take her DDGs through the questions one by one.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to request Acting DDG Pumeza on the forestry. I think there's a bulk of issues and questions that needs to be responded to for forestry. And then we will come back to DDG Mamkhala, waste, chemicals and waste management. And then I'm going to request DDG CMS to deal with the issues of vacancies as to why we could not. There were directives from DPSA, but I think the DDG will will on some of those directives that were there. And then the CFO chair will go into detail. We have tried to, elaborate on the challenge around the Triple P. It's an accounting issue, which also the issue around valuation in terms of the agreement interpretation. But I think that CFO can provide those details. We do need services of actuaries, but also National Treasury, clarifying the manner in which these must be disclosed in the financial statement. But CFO will then deal with that one, Chair. Thank you. They will respond in that order. Thank you, Chair.
Good evening to the Honourable Chairperson and the Honourable Members. In terms of the forestry-related issues, maybe let me start with the issue of the transfer of the biological assets. The transfer process in terms of signing off on the transfer certificate has not been finalized due to the fact that we needed to ensure that all the assets that were signed off by the former department are verified, and we are in the process of doing that verification. And we've set a target that we will make sure that by mid-December, the verification will be done, so that we can make sure that when the DJ signs off, at least the information that is on the ground is the same as the information that she will be able to sign off. Then in terms of the temporary unplanted areas, yes, we've had a lot of challenges with this target, and we have not been able to achieve it in the previous year. Mainly because when we usually do planting in 2 quarters of the year, which is Q3 and Q4, due to the rainfall that is usually at that time. So the targets that we set ourselves, we only can achieve them during Q3 and Q4. But due to the fact that we had lockdown at the beginning of that financial year, we were unable to then do proper planning in terms of procuring the seedlings to ensure that we are able to plant the trees at that time. Linked to that was the fact that due to lockdown, we had experienced high levels of theft and vandalism in our plantations, and the delays in terms of the security that was required for us to secure the plantations. What usually happens is that if we do not have the security, even if we are able to plant the trees, but if we are not able to secure them, there's always a high chance that they would then be vandalized. And then I think the other one was on the publishing of the State of the Forest report. There were a bit of delays with the finalization of the report in the quarters that we had set. So by the end of the financial year, even though the minister had managed to approve that report, we were unable to publish it on time, although we have now published it online. And then the hard copies, there were delays because we could not procure the service on time. But the report has now been published, and we have now achieved that target. Chair, I think those were the three main issues that I picked up on forestry, unless I have missed something else. Oh, there was also a question about the distribution of our TUPs across the provinces. If I may request, Chair, that we provide the breakdown per province, but in terms of the numbers, we currently manage about 110,000 hectares, which includes both what we call commercial and non-commercial areas. So our commercial areas are the areas where we are able to plant the trees, which is just above 64,000 hectares. And then the rest of the 46,000 odd hectares would be the areas that we use for roads, for fire breaks, and would also form part of your wetlands and all of that. So in the areas where we are supposed to be planting, we have a TUP of about 27,000 hectares. But the breakdown, if I may request that we can do it in a written format so that I can be able to do it per province. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson. With regard to the matter of waste pickers and the health impacts that they face at our landfill sites, it is a reality. And we acknowledge that waste pickers generally earn their livelihoods from waste picking, and because of the current waste system wherein most of our recyclables are not diverted from landfill, they end up resorting to picking at landfill sites. And our intervention, which I've also touched on, is working with waste picker associations and the provinces, one, to allow for waste picking through a controlled means, because the provinces are the ones that authorize mainly the municipal landfill sites where waste pickers work. But two, also because they are also providing a service to which the producers of these materials are also gaining a benefit. As part of our extended producer responsibility schemes regulations, we've also made provision that they get compensated. And as part of those schemes also, collection systems that are more formalized, that in terms of the working conditions of waste pickers then would be improved, because then they could be able to work from campsites and not necessarily from a landfill site. So yes, we are working with stakeholders, including the industry, that are the responsible parties to implement extended producer responsibility. We're also working with these waste picker associations to be able to ensure that by November 2022, as set by our regulations, then they can be able to also be compensated. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's DDG. Yes.
Thanks, Chairperson. There were two questions relating to corporate management. The first one was on the impact on level 4 and level 5 onto the recruitment process. During level 5, Honorable Chair, DPSA had issued out a circular prohibiting advertisement to be issued. And the reason was mainly that the respondents or candidates would not have an opportunity to submit their applications for considerations, and because we did not want to disadvantage potential recruitees in terms of job opportunities. Departments were then not advertising posts, and hence the level 5 and level 4 reasons being provided in terms of advertisement of posts. We are currently implementing virtual processes in as far as recruitment is concerned, and we have basically caught up with the latest development in enhancing our processes as well. On the difference between the 13.3% versus the 16.6%, the department has a total of 263 posts, which currently are on the post establishment as approved. However, they are unfunded, and this is what makes the difference in terms of the additional numbers, taking us to a 13%. So we only account for the vacancies that which are funded on the human resource plan in the immediate current financial year, which is 271, and that is what currently has resulted onto the 6.6% vacancy rate, because this is what was prioritized and vacant and funded in the current financial year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. The CFO will be the last on the PPP clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, DG and Honorable Chairperson and the members. On my side, it's the issue of the classification and accounting for PPP. My video is on, Honorable Chairperson, but I can't see. I hope you are fine on your side.
Yes, we can see you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. The issue on the PPP is that since we entered into the agreement, we have been accounting for the partnership as a finance lease since we entered into that agreement. Then in the financial year that has just passed, AG came on board and thoroughly assessed the agreement that we have in place and indicated certain elements that in a technical manner, when we should apply or when we are accounting for a finance lease, all the risks and rewards should be transferred. However, in this regard, in their assessment, there was an indication that it meets the criteria of the operating lease. And as a result, there was a challenge with splitting those costs, because there are elements that are fixed and there are elements that are operational in nature if we were to split the two. So the reason we are saying it's technical, because it needs the assessment of the actual, and that's why we went on board and requested assistance. We are requesting assistance from the Office of the Accountant General to assist us in outlining and clarifying that technicality. I think I highlighted that part when I was presenting the audit action plan. So that is the technicality that we are working on, because all along we have been accounting for it as a finance lease. However, in the previous financial year, after thorough assessment on the contractual obligations and the further analysis, it came out that we were technically not accounting for the partnership correctly. So that is the exercise that we are currently working on and engaging National Treasury in that regard, because they also have a portion that assists with PPP, and that is the part that we seek assistance and advice on. Thank you so much, Honorable Chairperson and the members.
Thank you, Ms. Just. We're done on this part, I suppose, DG. We're done?
Yes, we are done. We are done, Chair.
Then can I then hand over to the DDG responsible for the marine, the MRLF, to highlight the key critical issues. In doing so, I think she will also be responding to my questions. and then I'll allow the other colleagues to come in if there are issues they want to raise there.
Good evening, Honourable Chairperson, once again. Sue Middleton, DDG for Fisheries Management. And I'm also, we didn't introduce him at the beginning, but I'm also joined by the CFO of the Marine Living Resources Fund, Mr. Witness Roy Fontaine, who will take us through the audit action plan for the Marine Living Resources Fund. Could I ask that the presentation be loaded? Sorry, I've got a visiting cat here. Can someone load the presentation? And while that's happening, I will respond to the questions asked by the Honourable Chairperson of the Fisheries Management Branch. So the first question, Honourable Chairperson, was on the abalone poaching you mentioned in Claremont. And I think we would need to acknowledge as the fisheries branch that abalone poaching and West Coast rock lobster poaching, in other words, the nearshore species, is very prevalent, particularly in the Overberg, which are the Claremont and Gansbaai, amongst other areas, and abalone poaching is also common off Robben Island. It is a very, sorry, there was some interference. It is a very difficult issue to get under control because it does involve syndicated crime with high demand from the east. And there is evidence of very sophisticated Chinese triads involved in the abalone poaching, including colluding with communities, payment in drugs, prostitution. So it is an organized crime that is beyond the capabilities of just the fisheries branch. It does require a coordinated response from the security cluster, amongst others. But Honourable Member, you have raised a critical issue in that I think the department can do a lot more to work with communities in the management of illegal fishing. The small-scale fisheries policy explicitly makes provision for co-management structures, and we are in the process of setting those co-management structures up in the 3 coastal provinces of Northern Cape, Eastern Cape, and KZN. And they need to be a partner and a stakeholder in the fight against illegal fishing. In terms of the alternative livelihoods, our APP states that we will be piloting on the alternative livelihood strategy in 2 coastal communities. And those 2 coastal communities are Horneklip Bay in the Northern Cape and Humansdorp in the Eastern Cape. In terms of the FRAP policies, just to explain that the application process opened on the 1st of November and is divided into a 2-part process. The first part runs until the 22nd of November, and that is an online registration process whereby potential applicants create a user profile and they can download the application forms. And then the second part of the process starts on the 22nd of November, which is where applicants start uploading their applications and their supporting documentation. And in terms of the requirements then, the policies will be gazetted this week before the commencement of the application process. So the policies are not late. Rather, we have given extensive energy into carefully categorizing all the comments received from the public consultation process and making sure that the valid and legitimate comments are incorporated into the revised policies, which are with senior counsel at the moment as we speak for vetting. There was a question which was directed at Oceans and Coast, but it's actually a Fisheries branch question, and that is on the Aquaculture Development Law. And there, the bill was finalized and was ready for resuscitation under the 6th administration. But as a result of requests from stakeholders for further consultation, we've delayed the process, and that bill will now be revived in the next financial year. And then in terms of the inland fisheries policy, we have that has been approved by Cabinet, and we are now ready for implementation in the inland provinces. There was, Honourable Chair, also a question that you asked about verification of right holders. Just to explain that in terms of the FRAC 15 process, there was an agreement, well, there was a statement that all successful right holders would be subjected to a forensic audit to audit whether the the information that they provided us as part of the application process is valid and legitimate, and that they correctly and procedurally received rights, and they didn't furnish us with false information. We have now appointed a service provider who will be conducting the forensic investigations into all the successful right holders. So that audit hasn't started yet, but as soon as the reports are ready, we can share them with the audit committee. The tender, the terms of reference, also allows for ad hoc audit investigations for the FRAC 2021 process. So in conclusion, Chairperson, we are on track to allocate the FRAC 21 rights by the 31st of December. The applications close on the 7th of December, and adjudications will follow immediately after that. And then if we could move quickly to the MLRF annual report. We're going to skip whoever's driving. If we could go to slide 18. Because the first part is on the performance information, which is very similar, yes, that slide, which is very similar to the Q4 report, which we have tabled. So this slide, honourable members, just shows that we have received an unqualified audit opinion in this 2021 financial year, which is a great improvement over the past 3 years, because in 2018-19, we received a disclaimed audit with findings. In 2019-20, we progressed to a qualified audit with findings, and we are now on an unqualified audit with findings. And we will work very hard to put strategies in place to deal with those findings. And the CFO will talk to that as part of the audit action plan. If we can move to the next slide. These are just the challenges that we experienced during the current audit, the 2021 audit. There are 4 main challenges. The first one is, and this was highlighted in the AG's presentation this morning, that the MLRF was one of the guilty parties for making material adjustments to the financial statements after they were submitted for auditing, and as well as non-compliance with certain GRAP standards. And the CFO will speak to this in more detail. This has been incorporated into the audit action plan, but we have organized training, GRAP training for finance staff in January. We have also managed to advertise and fill certain key positions. And we have instituted a process whereby we will prepare detailed AFS or financial statements on a quarterly basis, which will be reviewed by a GRAP specialist as part of the internal audit process, and they will be tabled at the quarterly audit reports. I think this is all in an attempt to improve the quality and the standard of our financial statements. The second challenge, and again, the CFO will speak to this, was around asset management. We had a finding on asset management on assets, and in particular that we did not replace old or redundant assets, and they are still in circulation. The third challenge was capacity challenges. And this has been a finding by the AG in previous financial years, where we've had a number of vacancies in the office of the CFO. And we have managed to fill the CFO post, which was vacant for 10 years. We've also filled the Director Supply Chain Management and the Director Financial Management. And the AG has acknowledged in the management letter the significant progress made in filling these vacancies. And then the last challenge that we faced this audit was that we have an internal audit function that is outsourced, and the contract expired before while we were in the process of renewing it. So for a period of time, we did not have internal audit function. This was an audit finding. We have since gone out to tender, and a service provider has been appointed on a 5-year contract. Then if we could move to the next slide, which deals with the irregular expenditure. And here we've appointed a service provider to investigate irregular expenditure within the MLRF dating back to the 2013 financial year. And the irregular investigations were instituted to assess and determine, amongst others, the reasons for tenders being awarded irregularly, whether any losses were suffered, whether the MLRF received value for money where it did award tenders, whether any third party or officials had committed any acts of fraud and or corruption, and whether any persons can be held liable in law for the irregular expenditure. And the next slide, if you could go to that, please, just gives a breakdown of the irregular expenditure dating back to 2013. So although we didn't have significant supply chain or material findings this financial year, we do have a hefty amount of irregular expenditure dating back over many years. So the opening balance in 2018-19 was 183 million, and this is all irregular expenditure that was incurred during our time under DAF. And in particular, it deals with 183 million contract for some 70 million, 183 million contract that was deemed irregular for vessel management. There were 6 projects under the Working for Fisheries project amounting to 55 million. And then 2 law firms, Barnabas Kulu and Imang Basadi, who were appointed without following proper procedure and without working through the Office of the State Attorney. The department has instituted legal proceedings in this regard to redeem some of the assets, and we have successfully managed to freeze some of the assets belonging to Barnabas Pulu. I apologize for my voice. In 2019-20, there was 108,000 that an amount that relates to non-compliance with local content. And in the current financial year, there was an amount relating to non-compliance with PPE Treasury practice notes. We have referred this one to National Treasury, and we are waiting for their feedback. So the outcome of this investigation was done, and the report was finalized after the audit. So we will be implementing all the recommendations from now on and into the next financial year. And we are hoping as well that we will be able to, once we implement the recommendations, we will be able to reduce the balance associated with the total amount of irregular expenditure. And then, Chairperson, with your permission, I'm going to hand over to the CFO, Mr. Witness Royfontein, to take us through the audit action plan. And as I've said, some of the challenges I've highlighted have already been incorporated into the audit action plan. So over to you, Witness, if you want to put on your camera.
Good evening, Chairperson, honorable members, Minister, DG, and colleagues. I just want to start by indicating the progress that is being made from the previous years, which included the outcome as highlighted by the DDG of moving from a disclaimed audit to a qualified audit to a unqualified audit for the current year with findings. Obviously, the progress that's been made has been tremendous in the sense because with the limited capacity that's been there, the team, including the whole team in the Office of the CFO in MLRF, has actually put in a lot of hours to get where we are today. But in terms of our audit action plan, the AG has highlighted that the material adjustments and non-compliance to PFMA and GRAP. This is a technical matters where we are still engaging the AG on certain aspects of these findings that leads to material adjustments. And we also want to engage the Office of the Accountant General, because the issues of interpretation of these standards makes certain adjustments as to be made in terms of disclosures, not in terms of the amounts. So the amounts remain the same, but the disclosures require us now to change, for instance. But what we've decided also, except for the fact that we are going to have these engagements with the Auditor General for further engagement with the AG, is to arrange GRAP training for all of us in the Office for the CFO. And then we started in the process of preparing interim financial statements. Last year, before we submitted the financials, we've had a GRAP specialist looking at our Fs also in terms of the manner of how we interpret these things. We've implemented the majority of those recommendations, but I think it's just one of those things that the issues of gray areas possibly leads to these matters to be in the findings, but we've accepted them. Assets as being the other issue, that's also linked to the material adjustments where we've interpreted the GRAP 17 in a certain manner, and the AG wasn't very much convinced. So we had some technical people assisting us in this one, but we also agree with the AG now that it is time that we look at all these old assets that are still in circulation, that are still appearing on our asset register. And that was the basis of this finding, because what it meant is that our useful life estimates are incorrect, not correct, and that then kind of like leads to depreciation being calculated wrongly. The AG thinks that we write depreciation off too quickly. So we've also started with the asset verification. The asset verification team also looked at the matters the AG has raised in the non-compliance in terms of GRAP 17, which is the condition of the assets, whether they're still in a good shape, or they're still in use assets that are left with 1 year. Are we going to use them, continue to use them? And that is to ensure that we then comply to this GRAP 17. Part of the assets that we are replacing is one of our major assets, which is the Afrikaner. So we've had approval from Treasury to replace the Afrikaner vessel. So the Afrikaner is currently not, has been decommissioned basically for these major repairs. Can you go to the next page? Irregular expenditure, I think the DDG has touched in detail in this one. We didn't have any material SEM matters raised by the AG, except for the 56,000 rands this year that we've referred to Treasury. We are waiting Treasury's response in this manner. And over and above that, we've already had training for the managers, including SEM staff, that we've arranged through Treasury. We've also had training from DTI to discuss the issue of local content. So they've given us training on those ones, which included also the operation guys and supply chain. We intend to have bid committee training. We are just, I think, early next year, which will also go into next year. We will also be having that same training, not same training, the GRAP training for compliance, to comply with the GRAP, and to kind of like have a capacitate staff when we prepare financial statements. Consequence management, I think the DDG has dealt with that in detail in the previous presentation. And I think I can confirm that the 183 million as it is, that amount action has been taken to against the people that were responsible for the 183 million. So the only step that needs to take place is now we need to write to the DG asking for condonement via and to Treasury. Some of the amounts, those processes are in court, and I think the DG has indicated that they've frozen some service providers' account already. Next slide. Again, on this one, the AG, we didn't have any material findings on expenditure. However, we continue with our process of reconciling our general ledger accounts in order to ensure that we don't have wrong allocations, and also to review expenditure. The second one that's being mentioned is the non-compliance to legislation paying service provider within 30 days from receipt of an invoice. It wasn't a finding, it was just reported as part of the indicators in the AG in terms of the management of the MLRF, that they normally give certain indicators in that report that we are paying our service providers not on time. I mean, on the average, our payment average time is 38 days. And on our side, what we've done, we have reconciliations of creditors that will ensure that we can pick up before a reasonable time that a service provider is not being paid. Managers are also being encouraged to ensure that they adhere to these payment terms. On our side, the process that we've ensured is that to ensure that there's accountability is the Director of Finance is responsible for a finding of non-compliance to paying service provider within 30 days. So if the payment section do receive an invoice that has that is late, then immediately a letter should be issued to the project manager or the manager to indicate why the invoice is late. So that's the process that we have to ensure that we bring this 38 days down to below 30 days. Next slide. Some of the findings that governance findings that we had this year, the DDG has touched on the internal audit function that we didn't have. We have now appointed a service provider in the 2021-22 financial year. And the risk committee didn't have a charter. The risk committee has met. They've had risk training to identify, to compile a risk register. And they have also drafted a charter, and possibly it will be approved before the end of the financial year. We've had findings that were corrected that relates to predetermined objectives and performance information. They were all corrected. These included matters like we didn't include key risk areas in our in the APP in annual performance plans, and also we didn't have technical descriptions as required by the department. So we were non-compliant with those ones. IT governance, we didn't have training as planned, and also we didn't have a disaster recovery test performed for Oracle systems, and the MLRF systems were not included in the disaster recovery plan of the department. The chief director of IT in the department has engaged CETA to ensure that that the MLRF is covered by the contract that the department has. And then secondly, the training has been identified, and the training will possibly take place in the last part of the financial year. Next slide. I will just go down to the end so that not to the end, to the narrative. This is the financials of the MLRF. I think there's the next page, please. I'm not going to go to the, this is the old balance sheet that I've used to call it in the past. Next slide. And this is our income. The next slide. Yeah. I think I just needed to highlight certain matters about the Fs that were audited by the AG, which gives us some level of comfort in terms of how the organization is managed. In terms of our liquidity ratios, our liquidity ratios are looking quite good, because our cash that we have is more than enough to cover our creditors. So meaning that without even selling stock, or without selling or getting your debtors in, you will be, if you have to stop business on the 31st of March, you would have enough cash to pay all your creditors. And now debtors collections lead time is less than 30 days, as reported in the AG report. Our revenue streams have improved compared to the 2019-20 financial year, except for government grants and interest in service in kind. The government grant was reduced by NT to fund the COVID expenses. It was reduced with about 89 million rands. We've also ensured that our expenditure is tightly managed, and to fund the additional requirements of the COVID protocols. And then also another aspect that is also put pressure on our budget is fuel prices. The MLRF has these vessels that use a lot of fuel. And if there's an increase in price in fuel, then it impacts on the number of sea days that we can get out of the vessels, because if the less fuel you can get, the less sea days you can get. And just the last one on expenditure is that the lifespan of the Afrikaner was extended twice in the past, from 25, I think, to the next one was 30 and 35, and it's now 40 years. So the vessel has been decommissioned to replace the major components of the Afrikaner, like the engines that are too old now, 40 years. Next page. In conclusion, we are engaging the AG on various matters raised in the current year. And these matters involve more internal control matters. As indicated, sometimes if an activity requires, let's say, 5 people to be involved in order to have proper internal control measures in place, but you only have 3 staff members to do that, then you have to become creative, but also at the same time ensure the risk is adequately addressed for mistakes and also for fraud. We are currently capacitating the Office of the CFO and the MLRF, and we've already started implementing a majority of the AG recommendations. The DG has appointed the internal audit function, and as well as a few new audit committee members. And the risk committee will be strengthened with a full-time chief risk officer. All these positions were already advertised. I thank you. That's the last screen.
Mr. Roy Fontaine. Funds claiming the comment on the AG. Can I see colleagues who want to comment on the post-audit action plan in the presentation as for Mr. Roy Fontaine? Asked to be excused at 8. Yes, then yeah. Are there comments, issues that colleagues want to raise? Maybe before one wants to raise some issues there. Honorable, in that order. Honorable Bryant, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I don't know if it was just me, but a signal went a bit wobbly there. I think it might have just been my side, but I hope you can hear me. Yes. Just a couple of points. The first one was just a general point, because there was a discussion around abalone and a particular abalone poaching up in Kleinmond, and I know I've chatted to some of the communities up there and also in Hangburg, and one of the big sticking points does tend to be issues around aquaculture itself, and some of these ideas and proposals in particular for abalone farming. So I think that aquaculture bill is going to be a very important one, and the development of that going forward, to see how we can try and disincentivize people from going into the illegal activities of poaching abalone, and perhaps trying to empower them through abalone farming, if that is possible. But that's a separate discussion for another time. Just 1 or 2 questions for Ms. Middleton, and thanks, Ms. Middleton, for such a comprehensive report and presentation. I know that you have been working incredibly hard with the FRAP process, and I don't envy you the amount of work that you are having to put in to get this concluded. It must be a mammoth task. The two questions, just quickly, in terms of the service provider for the internal audit that you mentioned that's now been appointed, who is that service provider? If you can just provide a bit more information on that. And then when you were talking around the irregular expenditure and looking into who the different players were or have been, and mentioned the third parties, does the third parties aspect include inspectors, members of the SAPs perhaps as well, that could potentially be involved in poaching activities? Because as you've mentioned, you know, the SAPs does need to play a much larger role in policing poaching, but I don't think we're under any illusions that perhaps there are you know, elements within our own enforcement agencies that perhaps either are turning a blind eye or potentially involved in some of these activities. So just in terms of those two, I think that the presentations were quite comprehensive in terms of covering a lot of the points that I was going to raise. So thank you for that. And yeah, that's me for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleague. Dear colleague, can I then hand over to Honorable Weber?
Thank you, Chairperson. I just have one comment. Firstly, congratulations with your upgrading with your qualifications. But what I want to ask is, I'm very happy about the appointment of the Chief Risk Manager and the Risk Register. I think it's something that one just assumed is there. And but my comment I want to make, you speak about Mr. Roy Fontaine about charter. Is that the risk management policy that you're implementing, or what you mean by a charter? I just want to know if you have a risk management policy, or is the charter that? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And then let me also join the, before that, Honorable Mchun, I see your hand is up as well.
Thank you, Honorable Chair.
Over to you.
Greetings, and thank you for the presentation. Mine is on the training of in terms of GRAB.
Background of your picture, Honorable Mchun, is ever there's a background that you put there. You take it out, and let's see you messing up your. There you go. There you go. Okay, we want to see you with background.
Sure. Yes. My question is on the issue of the GRAB training that is that has been mentioned.
Apologies. Can we ask Roy Fontaine to switch off his microphone, please? It's disrupting the member, and you won't be able to hear the question. There are people speaking on the background. Can you do that so that you can hear and listen to the honorable member's question, please? Yes, I'm sorry, Honorable. You can proceed now. You're being disrupted.
Thank you, Honorable.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Proceed.
My question is on the GRAB training that the presenter has just presented, that they are now dealing with the GRAB compliant issues, the trainings and all, training of the staff. My concern on that one that I would like to be clarified on is that if we are now doing it, the SCM team, is it the whole SCM team that needs that training, or some particular parts? I mean, maybe particular staff members that needs that particular training. On the liquidity of the institution, is it the presentation by the CFO saying that in terms of the the current liabilities. The cash is adequate to cover the current liabilities and in terms of the debtors. But if we talk about the current liabilities, do we mean if we say we have the liquidity ratio is okay? Can it also include without any financial advances? Can it also include the salaries and all the salaries of the employees of the entity? If that includes them, then I'll be covered, and I'll be happy with the liquidity ratio. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honorable Lumchunu, for that. For those questions. Can we then get the responses? Then I'll then come after the responses have been finished with my remaining questions.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. So I think Honourable Brian's first one was a comment. Rather than a question about the importance of the aquaculture bill and the role that involvement in aquaculture could play in alleviating pressure on illegal fishing, and comment taken and noted. Then Honourable Bryant asked for the name of the service provider that has been appointed as the internal audit. And my apologies there, I was phoning the CFO just to find out if you could remember the name of the service provider, and that the service provider is Audit Risk Management Advisory Services. It's a company that we've not worked with previously as the MLRF. And I'll ask the CFO to comment on irregular expenditure, but you did ask about third parties. And yes, I can confirm, in fact, we actually have a criminal case and a disciplinary case that's ongoing at the moment involving what is known as the Gansbaai 11. They are inspectors or fishery control officers who were colluding with poachers, and they have been charged criminally, and that case is ongoing in the Western Cape High Court. Where one of the poachers has turned state witness. Yes, we don't have a risk officer. It is one of the positions that got frozen while we were under DAF, and then the post got abolished. So the DG has kindly assisted us to create a contract post. And that person will be starting shortly, and I think that will make a huge role for the MLRF. In response to Honourable Weber's question, the risk charter is not the same as a risk policy, so the risk committee needs to have a risk charter, and the risk charter hadn't been amended and reviewed for several years. That was the finding. So our audit committee, our internal audit, and our risk committee all are required to have charters in addition to policies. And then witness, I'm going to ask the CFO if you could answer on the liquidity and salaries, as well as the GRAP training and who will be targeted. With your permission, Chair, I'll hand over to the CFO.
I apologize for the disruption that I caused earlier. The training for GRAP will be for all the people in the office of the CFO, because they have to know all the GRAP standards basically. In one or other form, they do get involved with one of the GRAP standards. And then the liquidity. Currently, our salaries are paid by the department, so that part sits a little bit as a service in kind in our books. So the liquidity ratio does not cover the salaries. I think I've covered all of the questions. Thank you.
We are done, Chair.
Okay, my apologies for that. It's like it was my network challenge. Can I then advise you to go to slide 20 on the irregular expenditure breakdown? I want to speak on those slides quickly. It would be nice if you can fly them for us here, because there are issues that one wants to quickly raise in relation to that slide. And then as you are doing that, I should think, let me say this to the minister. Have you considered whether the MLRF can be absorbed into the department, or either to be capacitated to function fully as an entity with accountability structure? I'm raising it because it appears as you go through the whole report, throughout the presentation, the entity relies on service providers for just basic function. I'm raising this because on the slide that I said it must be flighted, you see what I want to raise here. Because from where one stands, I think if you can then absorb the entity, it could reduce the operational cost and improve accountability. I'm raising this because if you look on slide 20, the fund appointed the service provider to investigate irregular expenditure. This is what you are reporting on. And then the investigation was finalized, and then the recommendation of the report will be implemented in the current financial year. And then explain the reason why this was done. So this issue of, because the follow-up question I was going to ask, at what cost was this? And the value for money aspect of it. That's the question that I was going to ask to that effect. And then maybe, because the report has been concluded, can we then be finished with the outcomes so that we can understand the extent of the issues that were involved there? Then the other issues with regard to the irregular contracts breakdown on slide 21. The 2018-2019 financial year, I'm reading it from the slides, amounted to 183 million of SAMSA, consists of SAMSA 70 million, working for Fisheries Project 6 contracts worth 55 million, Barabanas Kulu 40 million, and Imang Wasadi 6 million. And then the remainder was 12 million, which consisted of non-compliance matters where procurement processes were not adhered to. You see, what the department has done was able to do that breakdown on the UIFW. Tell us
We've lost you, Chair.
Sorry, Tialeka, are you on the call?
I sent her a message, Honorable Bryant.
Okay.
Also trying to get hold of the chair, honorable members.
Okay, sure. My apologies, colleagues, but I was almost done on these matters. The network just messed me up. I don't know. Maybe it's the village network, Minister. So I was still on that point to say then that breakdown on that UIFW and the consequence management to identify the officials who were responsible. I think that will go a long way. Honorable Bryant, your hand is up again.
Chairperson, apologies, it's an old hand, as they say. I'll take it down.
Okay, thank you. So basically that should be the issues on my side. Minister and the team, can we get the response as we are moving towards the closure of the meeting?
Honourable Chair, let me take first bite on the question that you were asking me. I think that because the Marine Living Resources Fund is a trading entity, meaning that it receives revenue and its budget is based on the revenue received for fishing licenses, it will be very difficult to absorb it into the department. I think that we've come a very long way with this entity. When I was first told that Fisheries will be coming to our department, it was quite a shock because the Marine Living Resources Fund was bankrupt. The department had a disclaimer. There were posts that had been vacant for 10 years. There are more legal cases in Fisheries that pertain to previous rights allocation processes and so on. And everybody in the fishing sector is dissatisfied. So I think that it's a very, very difficult sector and it's coming from a very bad place. I think the team have done a very good job to stabilize it. And I think that really what we've been in for the past 2 years is a stabilization and recovery phase. I think that once we have concluded the FRAP process, we would be in a better position to start to address the longer term outlook of the branch and or should I say of the end of the Marine Living Resources Fund. And I think then we would need to apply our minds to the future shape and form. And I think that really it's the last couple of years have just, as I say, been a stabilization and recovery phase. And we haven't really had an opportunity in that process to be thinking about the long term. But you're raising an important point, and I think next year we have to give this due consideration. Thank you very much.
Minister, then can I hand over to the DDG and the CFO?
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I was always told that you never speak after your minister, and I think
No.
she's
There
covered.
were specific technical questions. She was addressing my question on the issue of the yeah. There were specific questions that you had to respond to. She has dealt with overall strategic matters.
and
I'm
very
still
well.
going to give her to say her final words. Don't worry, she's still going to.
Witness CFO, I'm not sure if you're able to assist us on how much what the cost of the service provider was for the investigation into irregular expenditure. If you're not able to do that on the spot, Chair, we would request to provide that information in writing. And perhaps that's the safest route to go so that we can provide you with the accurate information. And we can certainly make the report available along with the costs. Thank you.
you in agreement with what Ms. Middleton has just said?
Chair,
Or you want to respond?
Okay, thank you, Chair. The cost for that appointment was in the region about 450,000 rand, between 440 and 480,000 rand. And that's about. It was definitely below 500,000. It was not more than 400. It was not below 450,000, and it was over a period of about 4 months, basically. Thank you.
Can you submit that in writing also with the report?
We will do that,
Chair. Can we agree on that? Sure.
Yes, Chair.
And then also a breakdown on how are you addressing the UIFW when it comes to consequence management. Because we can see the parties you've mentioned, but what happened to the officials that were responsible for that? It's our interest. We want to know that. That's why I said the department on their part, they provided a detailed progress report on consequence management. And that's the issue that across the board that the AG has raised as a concern.
Well, we will make sure it's done.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think they have to do that because given the challenges and what you have said, Minister, to say to incorporate it's going to be a challenge because then, but the issue around the staff in the fisheries branch that are already there, that's the other issue. So basically that's it because our concern also is with regard to the staff that is there that came from the fisheries branch and the issue around consultants. Then I should think then, Minister, unless there's anything that you want to say, but I should think the issue that also needs further attention, Minister, I don't want you to comment on it. It's with regard to the internal control measures, including the role of the statutory bodies like the internal audit unit, including audit committee. And then also I'm glad that you are then trying to fill all the vacant positions. And then we are trying to appreciate the effort that you've done to make sure that those vacant positions are filled expeditiously. And then I think then the new recruits should just then make no excuse. I think they are fit and proper persons. They now understand and appreciate the challenges the department is faced with. I think when we meet in the next first quarter, in the next quarter, next year, things will have then changed. And then on our side is the department. I think our interest will be when you present your quarterly reports, we also then check whether there is then the audit action implementation plan is being implemented because it's what you said you're going to do. And I should think also that report, the MPET report that we got from the DPME, assist us a great deal to also follow up on issues that we need to look at that. But Minister, I want you to have a final word as we close this meeting. Anything that you want to say so that we can then close this meeting.
Chair, we just want to thank the committee for the opportunity you've given us to present the remedial actions that we are going to take. And we welcome the opportunity to report to you on a regular basis on the audit action plan and also to follow up on any issues of performance that you think are appropriate to bring to our attention. So I think we just want to thank colleagues. We had very long presentations and we're aware that everybody had already had a long day when we started. So we're very appreciative of the time that you gave us to explain. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister. And then maybe for the benefit of the colleagues, tomorrow after the plenary, we are dealing with the weather services and Sunbeam. And then on Thursday, I will do Sun Parks and Isimangali. So then we want to thank all of you. The meeting gets adjourned till we meet tomorrow evening. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you so much. Thanks, team led by the DG as well, Minister. We want to thank you for making time. The meeting gets adjourned. Enjoy your evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night.
Night, Chair.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Bye-bye.
Prescott?
Yeah.
Your mic is on.
Yeah. So did you know the? Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll ring you. Okay. I will ring you, or it is only you and I.
Hey, the meeting is still on YouTube. Can and Nomsa and Buiswa go to bed? It's past their bedtime already.
Good night.
You guys are still on YouTube.
Good night.
You know that. Please, 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 please. Leave. And communications. Yes, Prescott?